Hello, this is TurboDog702 doing a commentary for Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. This is going to be the New Game Plus route that we're going to be covering right now. So, Lords of Shadow 2, a relatively new entry inside the Castlevania series of games. If you're familiar at all with Lords of Shadow 1 or its speedrun, this is going to be considerably different. Lords of Shadow 1 focusing very heavily on out of bounds and lots of skips and sequence breaking. This game more about just clean movement and a little bit more combat, a little bit more production as well. This is partially due to the fact that a few of the cutscenes are unskippable, and we'll go into a couple of the issues with that as we go along. But I do feel like it does do a pretty good job of presenting itself to a casual audience, even if I do feel like the Lords of Shadow 1 speedrun is a bit more interesting. Right now we're just going through the initial level of the game, which is meant to be a tutorial. We changed the difficulty setting to the lowest possible. Difficulty changes the HP levels of enemies more than anything else. It doesn't seem like there's too much of a difference in AI or enemy composition. So it's just a strict improvement in time for not much change in actual gameplay. So it's noteworthy in this that we cannot unlock skills or do skills until we've done this tutorial. So for right now, I just gained access to the ability to dash or dodge. So now we'll be using that to kind of traverse more quickly and transition to other enemies a little bit faster. You'll notice I got hit there to do quick recovery. In this section of the tutorial, many of these abilities need to be done in a sequence, and you have to do them or else the game will fail you until you do them correctly. For example, I had to do a parry earlier, and after the parry I need to kill 5 or 6 enemies, depending on how they spawn, to get to this next tutorial where it teaches you how to feed. You'll notice I'm using this downward swipe with the whip. It's called Guillotine. It's one of your best tools when you have the Shadow Whip, which is your first weapon. It does quite a bit of damage, controls a lot of space, can be done relatively quickly, and it gets you in the air, and it's harder for enemies to deal damage to you when you're in the air. They have much worse offensive options. Now it's giving us a tutorial for the next weapon, which is the Void Sword. So the main thing with the Void Sword is it does less damage than the Shadow Whip or the other weapon that we'll see in just a bit. But it has a life drain mechanic where if you hit with it, you will drain health from the enemy and restore it. This is of little consequence to us, but we will be using Void Sword to set up a particular powerful glitch later on. These are the Chaos Gauntlets. The Chaos Gauntlets, while lacking somewhat in range, do a considerable amount more damage than either of the other weapons. They're also used to break shields and shield instruments. You'll see that as I'm fighting these enemies that the shields will glow red hot. You need to use Chaos Magic in order to break the shields. You can potentially counterattack enemies that have shields to do damage to them as well. But that really depends on how they decide to engage with you more than how you decide to engage with them, especially in this tutorial. So sometimes you'll see some weird things like this, where it looks like a cutscene I should be able to skip. That's because this is actually a QTE sequence, a QuickTime event sequence. Lords of Shadow 2, unlike 1, does have an option to turn off QTEs. Now, in a new game speedrun, we would want to keep on the QTEs for a little bit of time because they give you experience, which can be used to buy moves. I believe this enemy is called Ronald. He's the leader of the paladins attacking Dracula's fortress in this game. Main things to watch out for are to get parries off consistently whenever he does his melee attack like that, and back off from him if he does his burst. His burst cannot be parried, and you can't really get damage off of it, so you just want to keep yourself from getting knocked away and losing time. Just keeping yourself on him as much as you can. For the purpose of these next two fights, these next two kind of arenas on this mech's arm, Yeah, it's basically a mech. You can't really speed them up. So this is all just kind of for show. Until we get to the next sequence of this fight. This move that I'm doing right here, this kind of like wild swinging, it's pretty nice in this, but you won't really be seeing it in the speedrun. You will be seeing the Shadow Whip equivalent, which is called like sustained area attack, I think is what it's called. I call it the wet noodle, and we'll see that a little bit here and there. For combat options, you have a direct attack and an area attack. Area attack attacks all the area around you. Does low stun and lower damage, but it can be used to hit multiple enemies, or if they have like kind of a low threshold for getting stunned, it can help to control groups of enemies. Direct attack does more damage per hit, tends to have a little bit more range in one direction, and that tends to be the types of moves that we'll be using more often than not. So this is just a little bit of scaling. You'll see me jumping from peg to peg here. Whenever you're climbing, it's typically faster to jump from node to node because you can bypass single nodes. So I will attempt to do that as often as I can without putting myself in danger of losing time. We had to break the studs on the arm of the golem there in order to progress further. So all this is just some kind of basic traversal. We don't want to get hit because getting hit by any of these gears brings us back a considerable portion of time. So spending an extra second waiting on a cycle like here is fine. It means that we don't get sent back. A typical good time for a prologue, I would say, is about 11 minutes or less. We get a little bit of poor luck on this one, which contributes to a little bit of time lost at the beginning, but for the prologue, you're kind of at the mercy of spawn rates, how your battles with Ronald go, what patterns he gives you. So you just kind of have to adapt and do the best you can in order to progress. So this is a situation where we need to kind of just buy time until Ronald comes back to shoot his arrows, which will break the rivets on that shield in the back. So what I did there is I jumped to avoid the red unblockable attack that the enemy did. That's because I can't block it, so I can't just take it. And I need Ronald to shoot, and I need to have him shoot at that spot, so jumping's the best option in that case. Normally, if they attacked but didn't use their unblockable, I just hold block, and that would be fine. That was a really bad situation where, and this is kind of what I'm talking about, where you have to cope sometimes. The situation that they put me in with the shot timing that Ronald was going to have and the attack timing of the unblockable, I did not have the ability to really prevent that from happening and having to wait for another arrow cycle. That's relatively uncommon, but not rare by any stretch. So I'm willing to take a small time loss there just to kind of get a run going here. Kind of optimized that side crawl that you saw just a few moments ago a fair amount. You can skip over quite a few pegs that don't seem like you can skip them. So once again, we're just trying to break these 3 rivets. Not really a lot happening with this combat right now. At some point, I should probably work on some stylish combos to mess around with here, just for fun's sake. So I mentioned that I just kind of wanted to get a run going here, and we'll see, or I'll discuss more about what I was talking about referring to that as we go on with the run. But this run doesn't really start when you're making serious PB attempts until around the 30 or 40 minute mark, when you're starting to fight, I think her name's Risa Valkova, the first Alkalite for the first time. That's your first opportunity to get a really crucial crucial game-breaking glitch. So now we're going to fight Ronald again. Once again, you're just trying to avoid that burst and re-engage as quickly as you can and get off solid parries like that one. So even though parry slows down the game, this is still your best damage with what the game makes available to you and how evasive Ronald is. These next few attacks are scheduled. You can't skip them as far as I know. So you just got to kind of take it and move on from there. So now he's going to have the side dodge one. And then he's going to attempt to do an arrow storm here, where he shoots into the air. But if you engage on him fast enough, using dashes, you can break him out of that phase. Of note, you can break his two-handed weapon by punching him hard enough with the Chaos Gauntlets, which puts you into this phase again with the dual-handing, and that allows for parries again. And you can see how many bursts I'm getting here. Ideally, in a perfect world, he'd just normal attack every single time. You'd parry every one and just go crazy on him, but not always the case. So the next few scenes are just going to be recapping what happened at the end of the first game in the series. Dracula was put into a slumber that he is awoken from, and he wakes up in the modern world. It's kind of sad that there's no adaptation of period for Dracula, where he has to learn about cars and milkshakes and other various things of the modern world, but you know, we're beyond that. So that is a hallucination of Trevor, who is Gabriel Belmont, Dracula's son. Gabriel Belmont at the end of Lords of Shadow 1 becomes Dracula and gets his son Trevor, who is born without him knowing. In Mirror of Fate, Trevor goes to confront Dracula and dies to him. Dracula finds out that he's his son and gives him vampiric unlife, and thus Trevor becomes Alucard. So this fight, you cannot win it. I am just trying to speed it up as much as I can. This is another fight where it's kind of dictated by the enemy AI. Also of note, you cannot speed up this fight by changing to a higher difficulty. That was one of the improvements that I had made over a previous route, was discovering that it really didn't matter if you had turned down the difficulty here. So unfortunately you can't skip this scene, but Dracula is going to have to feed in order to get his power back. That being said, you can go ahead and skip over the more graphic parts of this particular scene, so this one's not that much of an issue, I would say. So as for what's happening in the story, Dracula awakens. Zobek, his traitor friend, tells him that Satan is going to return and is going to try to enslave humanity. At the end of Lords of Shadow 1, the ending boss is Satan, who had possessed Zobek and caused him to do bad things. Zobek was kind of a bad guy to begin with, though. So the first thing that happens with New Game Plus is we get access to all the experience points that we had on previous runs. Experience points are used primarily to unlock moves for each of your weapons. They can be also used to purchase things in a store later on. Right now it's tutorializing us on the Shadow Daggers. The main purpose of the normal Shadow Dagger is as a tool to break things for area traversal. We're now going to get introduced to the stealth mechanics. There are stealth mechanics that will be added to Lords of Shadow 2. For the most part, these stealth mechanics are mainly more puzzle sections than anything else, determining how to approach an area in a stealth section rather than giving you a robust stealth experience like a Metal Gear. These Golgotha guards are impossible to kill normally. The only way that we can defeat them is with possession, which is what we're going to do here. We need this Golgotha guard's biometrics to open up the door near us. That is correct, I did use the term biometrics in a Castlevania game. It's actually kind of ridiculous that even Dracula at his full power, when he's able to combat and defeat Satan in a fist fight, in the first game in just his human form before he gets all of his vampiric abilities. He can't beat these guys. I guess Dracula is just weak to Space Marines or something. But even at the end of the game, you still can't fight these guys. You'll notice that I will be dashing through most of this game. Dashing is a fair bit faster than just moving around normally. Later on, we'll be doing sword dashing or punch dashing, which is basically just sword dashing. But I'll cover that a little bit more as we get to it. So now we get access to the Bat Swarm. Bat Swarm is mainly a distraction tool in stealth segments like this, where we are distracting the guards to get around. You're going to see a little bit of dashing here. This dashing is stealth area specific. Normally, when you dash, there is a kind of like slowdown and then a recovery period before you can dash again. You can cancel this in stealth sections specifically by spamming your dagger and then dashing out of the dagger. As you can see, sometimes it can get a little bit difficult to control. But it's a very, very fast form of movement. The second fastest in the game, I would say, next to miss dashing, which you will see only sparingly inside of this run. We're now getting taken by Trevor into what appears to be the castle, Castlevania, Dracula's castle. Without going too much into this, it's kind of up in the air as to what is actually occurring here. It could be that the power of Dracula is such that he can manifest a pocket dimension or a memory in which the castle is still present and still in one piece, and as he remembers it. A theory that I've kind of posited and is pretty good on almost all fronts, and I think more fronts than the one that I just mentioned of Dracula's power. Alucard in the DLC has an ability called Timeless Vision. Timeless Vision allows him to visualize and then materialize the castle as he remembers it for short periods of time. We'll learn that as you enter the castle and leave it, you are oftentimes close to Alucard as this happens. And it could be that his Timeless Vision is being used in order to make the castle as he remembers it. A little bit of scaffolding and platforming here. There's not really a lot you can do to optimize this, but you're just trying not to fall down more than anything else. Right now we are on our way to claim our Void Sword, which is our blue weaponry. The two types of magic in this game are Void Magic and Chaos Magic. Nice little platforming skip here. Normally you're supposed to go all the way around the room to reach this area. And just a little bit of platforming before the Void Golem boss. So I mentioned there's two different types of magic. There's Void Magic and Chaos Magic. I might say Light Magic or Dark Magic. That's same things from the first game, just under a different name. That was a little bit of an embarrassing fall, but what happened there is that there are times where if you reach the end of a platform and try to jump, all of your momentum will just disappear. Once again, not a rare thing, but a relatively uncommon thing. But as I said, since the run doesn't really start until about the 30 or 40 minute mark, I'm willing to concede a little bit of time if I can get a run going here. So this is a little bit of a tutorial section talking about focus, magic, void magic, all that good stuff. This is the wet noodle I was talking about. Wet noodle allows us to get into the point where we get the absorption mechanic. You absorb up neutral elemental orbs in order to fuel either your void or chaos magic. So all this fight is just trying to optimize your combat to stay on top of him. You can only hit where there is blood on him, so for right now it's only his bottom section that takes damage. This was a relatively poor fight for Luck, as he did a lot of moves which kind of slow down the camera. I've done my best to initiate a glitch here, where if you actually jump after this cutscene and hit him, you can trigger a tutorial where it says not to hit the rock because it isn't vulnerable, and you're able to do that while this is playing out. If you do that, then you can be more aggressive in the second phase. Since I didn't get it to trigger, I have to play this a little bit more safely. There was the tutorial I was referring to. I wanted to try something a little bit different here. I've been trying a lot of things to optimize this fight, because it does have a lot of things that can go wrong. You want to just try to make the best that you can out of it. You're never in any real danger of dying in this game, but you can bleed away seconds relatively easily. In that second phase, it was required that I hit with jumping attacks, since the blood was on the upper body.
You can't destroy us. You belong to this place. You belong to us.
So now we get access to the Void Sword and the Primordial Gem. The Primordial Gem is going to allow us to use Void Magic. There's two different types of attacks you can think of. There is your normal physical attacks, and then there's almost like magical attacks for both of the special weapons. And each of those has different things that they do. For the most part, your magical attacks tend to be more utility-based, and they use a lot more of the magic gauge than normal. This is me absorbing magic from a magic font. Void projections can be used to freeze places in the environment in order to proceed, like this. They can also be used to freeze certain enemies or at least slow them down. Depends on how hardy they are. We're going to break this open and gain access to our first relic. There are a variety of relics in the game. The relics do different things. This one is the Tears of the Saint. Tears of the Saint would restore all of our health and give us a buffer on health. However, we're not going to need that. You're seeing our first sightings of sword dashing here, as you see me moving here. We're going to take a short time out here in order to purchase some special moves. We get Blizzard, which is going to be integral to the glitch mentioned before. We're going to get Whirlwind, which is extremely powerful for a number of reasons in single target damage. We get Icy Crest, not because we're going to use Icy Crest, but because we want it for when we get the Mist ability. So we're just saving a little menuing here. So you're going to see a little bit of Whirlwind here as we fight these Vampire Knights. So Whirlwind has some pretty weird properties. As you can see, it hits between 2 and 3 times on most small enemies, which isn't super great. But you'll notice that it kind of slows to a stop at the end of its movement, and the sword continues to spin. If you fight larger enemies and space them out correctly, or enemies that don't get stunned and knocked up into the air, you can potentially get between 6 and 10 hits on each individual iteration of this, which makes it pretty heftily the best source of damage for single target inside of the game. Assuming, of course, that you can get the extended hits on it and you can get that spacing consistently. In my previous runs of this game, I had severely undervalued this move because I had only seen when it did low damage, and it seemed almost like a glitch when it did more. But I have since kind of cracked that code, and we're using it quite a bit more in both New Game and New Game Plus. So at this point, we get the White Wolf Medallion. It is mentioned that Alucard is associated with the White Wolf, who leads travelers to safe destinations in the human lands. And here, we summon the White Wolf to take us back to the world in the present day. So this more leads credence to the idea that I was saying before, that Alucard might be associated with taking you back to the castle with his timeless vision. This does run into some other issues with reconciling it with the rest of what happens inside of the game, but so does the other theory regarding the power of Dracula himself. For now, though, that's kind of all I'm going to touch on that subject, but I did want to posit that out there, as that's something of a sticking point to people with this game and the story, is kind of figuring out what is happening in this early part. So we're back at Biochemech Chemical. We're going to go ahead and get a little bit of Void Magic here to top ourselves off. We're going to be using that Void Magic to freeze the Vampire Knight here so that we can traverse this area. Typically, if you try to climb areas while enemies are active, they will have a ranged move that is quite quick to try to knock you out of it and force you into the arena. Here we're going to freeze the vent, dash out of the frost projectile, and then go to a shadow portal where we can turn into rats. We do that sequence like that to cancel out of an animation where there would be a cutscene that plays where it shows the vent freezing over and frosting. But we skip that by turning into a rat during that time. A little bit of tight platforming here. This isn't as dangerous as it looks, but you can die there. A little bit of poor movement. A little bit of rat forming here as we jump over the flames inside of the vents. So even though they have a shadow portal here, we do not want to untransform. We want to continue on into the next vents. In the next vents, I'm going to be looking for the wire at the far end. The wire at the far end sparks twice before stopping. And unfortunately, due to the timing of that, I had to wait on this cycle. Again, fairly common thing to happen. It's just, if you can get away with moving a little quicker, it's nice. After we die here and skip this cutscene, we will be returning to checkpoint after a short delay. That is going to bring us out of the vents and make it so that we don't have to untransform from rat. Saves a few seconds. It's important to wait there a short time, though, to make sure that the autosave does complete. And we're going to use that stealth dashing to be able to possess a scientist. More like a tech worker that was fixing the door that we just broke. So one of the other things that happens with a New Game Plus run is you gain full access to all the life gems, void gems, and chaos gems that you picked up. So we have all the upgrades possible that we can have for your character's stats. Unlike Lords of Shadow 1, however, you do not keep the relics or the special artifacts that give you movement tech or that you can use as consumables. In this fight, it is potentially possible for certain relics to drop, as it was in the Vampire Knight arena with Trevor. Those are the first two opportunities you have to really get relics that don't cost time. Unfortunately, we only get Stola's Clock, which isn't particularly useful here. This is the first boss, Risa. We need to use a Void Projectile here to slow her down, otherwise she moves like as fast as electricity. And this is an example of the Whirlwind tech that I was talking about. You'll notice that when I use it here, it hits way more than 3 times and does a ton of damage. So we are trying to set up a situation where we get Risa to low health and then initiate what's called the Infinite Blizzard Glitch or the Blizzard Glitch or Ultimate Blizzard. I might interchangeably use the term in a variety of ways. So here I was trying something a little bit different out, in which I was trying to use Whirlwind more aggressively in order to speed this fight up, and thus set up the Blizzard Glitch more quickly. I do run into a little bit of a rough situation here, though. So, I wanted to do it one more time, but because I got her on just the tip, and I moved through here, I hit her with probably the best version of Whirlwind, which hits about 10 times. The extra damage that I did there, unfortunately, pushed her into a death state. So I gained a lot of time on the fight itself, but I'm going to lose that time in initiating the Blizzard Glitch a little bit later here. That would have been the first opportunity that we have in order to initiate the Infinite Blizzard Glitch in a good way. And I'll discuss that a little bit more when we actually get the glitch. We will be getting it in this next arena, which is going to be against the Prison Guard arena. However, since I do not have it active, and for the purposes of PBs, I really need this glitch for this early part of the game. I will be making an estimate that considers not getting any good Blizzard glitches, but the probability of getting no Blizzard glitches that are helpful is quite low. Things would have to go very poorly for that to happen. So I tried to do a little bit of adaptation here by using the bat, which can be a distraction tool, to distract the jailer. The problem with the jailer is you cannot attack him from the front. If you attempt to attack him from the front, then you will bounce off of his armor. Normally you would use the chaos magic to break armor like this, or shields, like in the tutorial, but at this point they attempt to make you fight these enemies without the benefit of chaos gauntlets. Of note, we are on our way to collect the chaos gauntlets, which we have been told are being held by the Gorgons. So in retrospect, after trying this strategy, I think what I would do is I would just get the somersault ability, which is another ability on the skill tree, and then the somersault attack. That ability does a relatively good job at fighting this enemy. But as mentioned, I wanted to try something, and this was my last opportunity to try and get a run going. So here I'm trying to hit Blizzard. And what I need to do in order to initiate the Blizzard glitch is you need to kill an enemy that initiates a cutscene with the Blizzard glitch. So for example, if the last hit on the boss was a Blizzard glitch, or was a Blizzard hit, it could initiate the glitch. And this guy has a cutscene after him as well, so I am trying to make the last hit on him a Blizzard hit, which I did there. So what does IBG do, Infinite Blizzard Glitch? Well, Blizzard itself, as you can see, was like a field of frost, which does light damage to enemies, heals you since it's void magic based, and it freezes enemies in place. What IBG does is, right now, the Blizzard spell is active on me as an aura, even though I can move around. So I am constantly under the effect of Blizzard, even though I can move with it. It is also not consuming mana even when it hits. You can see my gauge is not going down at all. I mentioned that there's a bad Blizzard glitch, or a poor form of it. Bad Blizzard glitch is when you do the glitch, but it continues to drain your mana. Sometimes it's not that big of a deal, due to another relic, Ensnared Demon, later. But there are quite a few situations where getting a bad Blizzard glitch means that you will have to get rid of the glitch in order to progress. We're going to start to see a little bit of the power of the Blizzard glitch here in just a moment. We're going to do a little bit more sword dashing here. And then we're going to be using Infinite Blizzard to freeze some smaller prison guards. By freezing them, we prevent them from having them. By freezing them, we make it so that we can leave this arena. We prevent them from stopping us. I also used a bat ability to distract the one that was further away from me. That way I didn't need to use transitional movement to get to him and back. Right now we're doing a little bit of a platforming puzzle. This is to reach the Chupacabra, who is jailed over there. We're going to save him because he knows where the Gorgons are. He also offers to open up his shop to us. A little bit of a sequence break here. Normally you're supposed to use these platforms to move around to these other areas. But by optimizing your jump distance and adding an area attack at the end and a slight dash, you can make those jumps. This is faster on any less than, I think, 8 or 9 failures. What we're really looking for is like 3 or less. This is still a little bit difficult, especially on that last one, the one to the final switch. But it's still worth going for, and not too difficult. So now we need to move the cell itself over to the unlocking mechanism, and then we're going to move on to further places in the castle. So the problem with Infinite Blizzard Glitch is if you get the bad form of it, and you reach 0 void magic, which will happen very quickly, you cannot even turn on your chaos magic. So even if you have full chaos magic, if IBG is on and you have no MP, then you just cannot switch weapons. This is important because there are certain areas where you have to have chaos gauntlets to break them open, or you need to use chaos magic on your projectile to blow up certain things. And if you have a bad blizzard going, that's just not possible. The other downside to IBG going bad is you don't have access to sword dashing, which is a little bit less. Sword dashing is not as big of a difference as dashing compared to walking, as far as speed is concerned. What it does is it reduces the recovery time it takes at the end of a dash to start a new one. So it is noticeably faster, but not hugely impactful. So there will be times where you'll see me just normal dash for better movement, as opposed to a long stretch like this, where I want to try to do sword dashing as much as I can. It is possible to skip this arena by getting a damage boost from one of those harpies onto the upper platform. However, it's rather inconsistent. And by doing this arena, I actually set up for something later on. One of these jailers will drop an ensnared demon, which is probably the most important relic in the game. I'll cover that in a moment. And they will each guarantee drop a dungeon key. I will be using one of the dungeon keys to open up the gate behind me, and the other dungeon key, if I have a good Blizzard glitch after the Gorgons, I can use that to bypass an arena later on. Since, spoilers, I do manage to keep Blizzard glitch after Gorgons, you will get to see that as well. There's the Ensnared Demon. Ensnared Demon is important because it allows you to have infinite magic while it is running. It's extremely high regeneration rate on your magic. So while your magic may drop if you use particularly taxing moves, and you might have to wait for it to regen a little bit, it's very quick to get your magic back at that point. The downside to Ensnared Demon is you do need to have an Ensnared Demon, and at the end of its duration, it will drain all of your magic away. It's still a very, very powerful tool. So now we're going to get the Chaos Gauntlets that the Gorgons were holding. So Infinite Blizzard Glitch does a lot of weird things to the game, and we're going to see that in this fight as we move from Phase 1 to Phase 2 and Phase 2 to Phase 3. Even at this beginning part. So normally you're supposed to use the Chaos Gauntlets to break this wall that Gorgons have just made. I have to go to the side of this wall to break this with the Blizzard Glitch. If I tried to attack it from the front, the Blizzard would actually kind of like freeze the rock and prevent it from getting heated up. It's rather silly, but that is the way around that, is to just go around the side and deal with that. At this point I use the Shadow Whip. The Chaos Gauntlets would do more damage individually, but I need to get a tutorial in which it tells me to absorb for Shadow Magic, which should happen in just a moment here. The other advantage is Shadow Whip has considerably more range, and because of how this fight happens, it can be difficult to hit Medusa as or rather the Gorgons, as they move back and forth. I might say Medusa. Medusa is one of the Gorgons in this. So in this phase, we got to freeze her hand, and then we got to make her way up her arm. Note what happens as I go up her arm. And this is because of Infinite Blizzard. So, normally you're not supposed to be able to do damage to her as you're moving up her arm, and you're supposed to dodge that claw attack. But since Infinite Blizzard is rolling at this time, it causes a lot of glitchy states. This is a problem for Gorgon specifically. You'll notice I was crawling on her arm, and then I entered almost a standing state. It's possible that the Gorgons can throw you off of their arm, and if they do that, you can fall in the pit that's where she's coming from. If you fall in that pit, you die and have to restart from checkpoint. The ways to lose Infinite Blizzard are to restart from checkpoint or to die and have to restart from checkpoint. It's also dropped on normal things like closing out of the game and such. But we want to try to keep it here. So if she threw us off of her arm, we would have to redo the phase and we would lose Infinite Blizzard, which is not great. Still working out ways to make it more consistent. You'll see I take this arm very slow because, as I was mentioning, in serious PB attempts, I want this glitch. Like, it's real bad here, as you can see. And there's not really anything I can do about this. I just gotta kind of hope that I can crawl up the arm without falling off. So normally she's supposed to swipe at you as you're on her neck to protect her face. But because glitch is up, you notice it's hitting her hand when it shouldn't be. So at this point, I'm kind of like doing a slight fist pump because, you know, I got a run going. So it was worth it to lose a little bit of time getting this worked out because I'm going to gain up a lot of time later on. Once again, it's not the end of the world for a run if you don't get it, but it's okay. This is the quick kill. By throwing a kind of frost ball there, you can kill her instantly. Sometimes she'll do a flame rain that you need to avoid or do other attacks, so that was good luck to get that immediately. Usually you'll either get it immediately or she'll do a flame rain, and then you get the breath, the kind of like quick kill breath. So we see the mechanic of Chaos Bombs, which is the Shadow Daggers infused with Chaos Energy. Does quite a bit of damage, actually. Something that I had undervalued until I started routing New Game, non-New Game Plus, just New Game. But they're also used to break open certain passages. They have all the effects of Chaos Magic as well. They can break shields relatively quickly. They have huge range. They're very quick, so enemies have a hard time dodging them. And they do quite a bit of damage. You will see me implement those and the freezing Shadow Daggers here and there. We're going to learn a few moves here. We're going to learn Explosive Earthquake, Fire Cover, and Flame Claws. Flame Claws is once again not going to get used, but it's used for Mist later on. We pick up Counter-Strike Punch for something way, way later in the game as a potential option. This is kind of the punch dashing. Same concept as sword dashing. Only works for the special weapons, though. It does not work for a normal whip. You have the same recovery on that. So here, I'm trying to initiate a skip I was talking about. Right here, I'm using fire cover to draw in some enemies so that I can freeze them. By doing that, I'm creating kind of a wall that increases my chances of getting the skip. Right there, he swung at me, which broke the skip a little bit. But that being said, it was very quick to get back on the lever. And now the huge guy is blocking for me. So the real issue there is if one of the guys does a ranged attack and knocks you out of the lever pull animation. But by creating a wall of enemies there, it makes it much less likely. I used the dungeon key that I got from the previous arena in order to activate that switch. If I did not get that there, or if I did not have Blizzard coming out of Gorgon, I would have had to have done that arena, defeated the larger jailer and its minions, and then used that dungeon key to open up the gate. So, as I mentioned, even though I'm losing a little bit of time not doing that Harpy damage boost skip I was referring to, I'm gaining back a fair portion of it there by not having to do that arena. This is the Chupacabra's shop. We're going to buy all of the relics he has and then leave. The Chupacabra is going to give us access to the Talisman of the Dragon. Talisman of the Dragon is very similar to Dark Crystal in the first game. It's essentially a full screen clear. That being said, it takes 5 pieces of a Talisman of the Dragon to activate, and they're relatively rare to drop. You're also not able to transmute relics into Talisman of the Dragon pieces, which is what you're seeing here, is transmutation. So transmutation is a 99-cent DLC. Because of this, it's because of how cheap it is and how much consistency it adds to the route, we've allowed it into the game. What it allows you to do is turn one relic into another type of relic. The reason that this is important is it allows us to do things like buy out the Chupacabra's shop, transmute all of the relics that we don't want into ensnared demons, which we do want. This takes a lot of luck out of the run, as otherwise you'd be really hoping for ensnared demon drops to do certain strategies. This just kind of makes it so that you can do whatever you want and have magic whenever you need to. Also prevents you from having to drain magic out of mana fonts. It can also make the effects of a bad blizzard much less damaging to you, because if you break an ensnared demon, it'll give you a full mana bar to start, so that gives you a few scant seconds to maybe throw a chaos bomb to progress the story or something like that before you can get locked out of weapons again. So, at the Risa fight, we discovered that the Acolytes of Satan are using a chemical weapon in order to turn people into monsters and demons. Just using chaos and void bombs to progress through this area. So now they've doused the town in this gas that's turning people into these monsters. They've since discovered that there is a train leaving by Aquamech for some unknown area. They reason that something might be on that train connected to this virus or gas, and possibly even an antidote, something of that nature. So there are times where you don't really want to sword dash. Because of the game's assisted combat camera like there, it can really mess up your movement because it's trying to focus on enemies. Also, when you swing your blade, oftentimes it'll try to target the closest enemy. So because of that, sometimes you do want to use normal dashes to move from place to place. A little bit more rat forming here. As you can see, the rat form is mainly just a traversal tool and a tool for stealth sections to add more complexity to the puzzles. So in this area, if I didn't have Infinite Blizzard, I would have to use Fire Cover, which is kind of that fire field that vacuums guys in to clear this next arena here. Since I have Infinite Blizzard, I am going to be using Fire Cover to pull everybody in to get frozen, but after they're frozen, I can just leave. So I save a few seconds there. So I've already come up with backup strategies for almost every situation where I wouldn't get Infinite Blizzard. So I have backup strats ready. You still really want to get the Infinite Blizzard, and ideally the good Infinite Blizzard, but, you know, sometimes you just gotta concede that you're not gonna get it. Especially if you're talking about a marathon safe route. That being said, it's also quite marathon safe to run this game if you get the transmutation runes for both New Game and New Game Plus. New Game's a little bit rougher because you don't have access to some of the extremely broken abilities that you have. Less mana in your mana gauge means you can't use certain abilities as aggressively, but it's still quite good. So if I didn't have Infinite Blizzard here, and I felt a little off about my mana, there is a mana font here that I can use in order to fill up. However, my mana's good, and I have Infinite Blizzard going. Life is great. So we freeze these and go to this lever. When you're activating this lever, these Vampire Knights can't actually break you out of it. I just got hit with a Scream attack twice there, but that doesn't affect you in this particular one. I will get Scream attacked sometimes as I'm climbing this next section. If you don't have Blizzard Glitch going, it's pretty often that they'll follow you through this door and shoot you as you're climbing here. However, they aren't able to hit you more than once or twice, and then you can make your way up. So still much faster to skip them than to engage the Vampire Knights. You'll have to forgive the audio quality a little bit on this commentary if it is a bit off. I'm currently dealing with some suboptimal conditions for recording. I'm having to record in a different room in a different studio type than I normally am, so I do apologize about that if my voice isn't coming in as clear as on some of the other ones. We're going to be coming up into another arena here. The first thing we need to do is clear out these demon minions. You cannot get Infinite Blizzard on this fight, but you can get it off of the next fight that's going to be happening. The setup for that is if you do not have Infinite Blizzard on, you can draw the guys in like this with fire cover to kill off 2 of them. Once you kill off 2 of them, you can potentially use the freezing ball to freeze them in place, break an ensnared demon if you need mana, and then finish them off with Blizzard. Since I didn't need Infinite Blizzard, I just used fire cover to finish them off. Fire cover is actually really, really powerful too. Another move that I didn't undervalue in New Game Plus, but definitely gained value since using it in New Game. It's very strong, draws people in, and also is very cheap on resources. Another really good option is Explosive Earthquake, which hits only single people at a time, but it's quite quick and does good damage per hit. The main downside to Explosive Earthquake is that it does take quite a bit of chaos magic. So here's another situation. We can freeze these guys to climb out of the arena. You're seeing here a trick that you can do, which is using the bats in order to distract one of the guys, so you don't have to use movement on him. Filling up a little bit of magic here. I like to try to keep full magic on 1 gauge as I can. If I didn't have Blizzard there, I'd be using the Frost Balls to freeze one of them twice, then throw the bat to distract the other one, and then throw a final Ice Ball at the already frozen enemy just to extend the frozen period. And then I could get out of there just fine. So that wall is an example of something that would be a problem with bad Blizzard. If I had bad Blizzard, I would need to break an ensnared demon here just to break that wall and move on. Again, wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would just be an annoyance. So we're going to go around the side here and make our way up the tower. If you don't have Blizzard Glitch, you kind of need to move quickly through that area. Otherwise, those demons can follow you and use their shotguns. Yes, demon guys with shotguns in a game with the name Castlevania. They could shoot you off of this steam pipe tower out of a chemical plant. Boy, this is a weird game for context of the series. But I digress. We're moving on. So we're continuing to make our way over to the train station that was mentioned before. Currently sending freight to an unknown location. This is kind of a tricky climb. When you reach the top of here, you have to get away from the edge as soon as you can. Otherwise, it's likely that they'll knock you back down where you came from. Of note, most of the time if you miss a jump in this game, you don't die, you just get returned to your previous platform with a little less health. Nice little mana font there if I did need mana. Again, if I had bad Blizzard, I'd be using an ensnared demon there in order to break those chains. We're now coming up to the area that is known as the container skip. There is a console container skip, which is much more abusive than the one I'm going to do here. However, we do not have access to that one. The PC version of this game had patched out quite a few bugs. We do have a different type of container skip, but I'm going to be doing a half container skip here. So normally you're supposed to ride this all the way down, and then at the bottom right, you're actually seeing another set of storage containers moving past. I'm going to jump to the one on the other side of that electricity. That's the half skip. If I did the full skip, I'd be doing a running jump to get to the next container in front of me. The reason I'm not doing that is it saves about 15 seconds, and you lose about 50 seconds if you miss it. The problem is that when you enter the tunnel, or there's some sort of issue with your momentum as you jump off of the container, I haven't quite cracked it, but I think it's related to the container entering or leaving the tunnel. But you can easily fall off of that and not make that jump, despite how easy it looks. So at this point, we are restarting from checkpoint. The reason we're doing that is to get rid of our Blizzard Glitch. So there are times where you do not want IBG. Stealth sections are one of them. So in a stealth section, you're normally not supposed to be able to deal damage to enemies. And if you have Blizzard going, it'll just hit enemies. And if you hit enemies in this, the Golgatha guards will just keep shooting you, and you won't be able to do anything about it. So by getting rid of Blizzard Glitch, we enable ourselves to actually do the stealth sections. I've also heard that sometimes if you have Blizzard Glitch going and you hit one of the Golgatha guards with Blizzard, that the game can crash. This game does uncommonly crash. A crash usually costs about 40 seconds in order to get the game up and running again. However, the game's autosave feature is pretty robust, so you never really lose too much time. The worst thing is that you could lose Infinite Blizzard, which is unfortunate, but as I mentioned, I have quite a few strats for that for a marathon setting. So just some basic stealth happening here. I guess I could talk a minor bit. I mentioned the container skip. Had I not jumped off of that upper container, the intended path is to take it all the way around and then drop off on the other side of the electricity, which is a fair degree slower. So we're just making our way onto the train. And on the train, we're going to get attacked by one of Satan's minions. And there's going to be a prolonged kind of chase sequence where we have to move through the train while avoiding Golgatha guards. So, yeah, just some very basic movement here. Yeah, as I mentioned, this is really a weird game because you get such a contrast of style from any other Castlevania game. There are some very nice visuals in this at times. It's just a shame that it isn't as visually impressive as the first game. But they did fix quite a bit of the combat, which is nice. So Whirlwind completely owns that phase. He moved kind of in a poor way, so I had to do a second Whirlwind. But you can kill him very quickly and move on to the next phase of the fight. So since I do not have Infinite Blizzard Glitch, I am going to try to set it up again on this demon at the very end of this train sequence. The most impactful Blizzard glitches come at the very start of the game, where either you do it on the first boss, the first acolyte, or you do it on that prison guard where I got it. Getting that one is one of the most impactful in the game. The most impactful one that we haven't hit yet is going to come off of fighting the first acolyte for the second time. That's the one you really, really want to get, because otherwise you have to fight certain bosses without it, and it's kind of problematic to deal with them. It's kind of a trick arena, you know, they see him moving towards them and then you panic and do anything you can to try and avoid it, but no, you actually just gotta stand still. All good. So this fight is an auto-scroller. I'm not really doing damage to him. But what I can do is get some magic. So if you look at the bottom, there's like kind of a flashy light that just extinguished. That's your focus meter. If you fill that up, every hit while it's filled will release neutral elemental orbs. You can absorb those to get void or chaos magic as you need it. It breaks whenever you get hit, or if you don't hit something for a while. And it fills faster based on attack variety. So if you do more various attacks, it fills more or less. You're noticing at the top left there's sometimes like a percentage. This game does have like a level up system for your weapons. For New Game Plus, you don't really use it. However, it does have some use in New Game. If I was to level up my weapons, it would be a 30% damage increase on most moves associated with the weapon. In order to do that, though, the first level up requires 3 mastered moves, and the second level up requires, I believe, 8. Both of these are not particularly practical and not particularly impactful in this run because of how much magic you have access to. So this is the final fight with this guy. What we would like to do is set it up so that he gets to low health and then kill with a Blizzard Glitch. I believe I get a small bit of poor luck on this. It'll be interesting to see, though. I've been doing so many runs of this lately that, like, some of them are kind of bleeding together. So sometimes I stop Blizzard early, specifically so that I don't run into issues. Breaking in Ensnared Demon here to make sure that I have enough magic to do this. And we get the Blizzard Glitch. So I'm willing to break the Ensnared Demon there and lose my magic just to guarantee that I get this, because this will save time overall. What I've run into sometimes is if I try to force the matter, sometimes the duration of Blizzard will run out, and then I'll swing and kill him with the last hit, which is pretty frustrating. So because of that, I have been taking it quite a bit slower to try and guarantee that I'm killing with the Blizzard. Another difficulty with killing with Blizzard is that the damage is quite small, so it can be quite some time if they have a large amount of health. This is Explosive Earthquake. The nice thing about Explosive Earthquake is it does a lot of damage. It'll seek in on targets, and it's very quick to deal damage. Stuns quite a bit as well. The downside of it, as mentioned, is that it eats a lot of chaos magic. However, since Ensnared Demon was fueling my magic at that time, it was my best offensive option. I also knew that if I wasn't going to use the magic that I had, that I was going to lose it at the end of the duration of Ensnared Demon. So it's totally fine to use it for that application. Here you travel with Zobek's Lieutenant, and you're meant to use him to do some light problem solving. That mist is a result of the Blizzard Glitch. It kind of causes a lot of stuff to freak out in that particular room and in the next room. There is a skip that you can do in this room involving this demon uppercutting you over the wall in the background. However, it does require him to do certain patterns and a little bit of luck. I found that it doesn't save that much time comparative to just doing the arena with powered up moves. So, like, ideally I'd maybe get the skip now, maybe a few seconds back. But at this point, the real draw needs to be consistency for the run. I have not pushed this game nearly as much as Lords of Shadow 1 for, like, super optimization. But also, as well, I feel like the optimizations in this game save you way less time than the optimizations in some of my other games, like Symphony of the Night or Lords of Shadow 1. So really, it's just more about clean, structured play and understanding when you need resources and what to do with them than anything else. The Lieutenant's going to leave us at this point. We're going to continue forward on our own. There's a slight skip you can do here that involves jumping on geometry to get forward a little faster. Small time save, quite difficult, not particularly worth it. So now we're going to make our way back into the castle, where Marie, our wife, is apparently in some danger, along with Trevor. So these are bloody skeletons. Bloody skeletons possess a blood pool. You need to kill the blood pool, not the skeletons. But an interesting thing, and the reason why we really want Blizzard for this, if the skeleton is frozen when you kill it, it doesn't spawn a blood pool, it just dies. Which is very nice, because dealing with blood pools is rather annoying. If you don't kill the blood pool, it goes to another skeleton and will reanimate that one as well. If I didn't have Blizzard Glitch up, then I'd be using the freezing bomb. It's a little stealth section with Carmilla from the first game. We need to activate these 4 ruins on the ground. Luckily, dagger dashing or stealth dashing is pretty fast to get from place to place. We can even kind of avoid her lantern there. So, unfortunately, she passed a little weird here. Normally, she would teleport to this location, and I could just get past her. Because she moved in this way, I kinda have to slow roll this last ruin. If I get caught here, it means that she locks me in this arena with a couple of enemies that I have to fight. So it still does save time for me to wait on that cycle. So even though there are minor mistakes or minor problems in this, like not getting Infinite Blizzard on Risa and having to get that on the Prison Guard, I'll also run into another issue at the very end game. But to be honest, this is a game where, as I mentioned, so many things can go wrong when you're talking about doing a PB attempt. To the point where it's like, you have to really grind out this game because of a number of reasons. You need to pick the right Marie there. That is a 50-50 shot. It is even more of a 50-50 shot because Infinite Blizzard makes it so that you cannot watch them do their tells. I need to break her shields with Chaos Magic here. Explosive Earthquake is your best option. If she gets away from you, Chaos Bombs are good too. We're going to freeze her and set her up for most of the other phases with good Whirlwind, just spacing Whirlwind out correctly. Killing the clones here is fastest with Explosive Earthquake, and then once again, we're just going to get access to the Mist ability and use Whirlwind to dominate the rest of the fight. Getting back to the 2 Maries thing, because I have Infinite Blizzard going, you'll notice Marie got hit and like fell to the ground. That's because I'm doing damage when I shouldn't be able to. So I have to activate that cutscene immediately. If I don't, then I get in a soft lock state where I need to restart from checkpoint. That being said, if you fail, it kills you. So you'd be restarting from checkpoint anyway. And we don't really need Blizzard Glitch for this fight. It's just a convenience. We also don't need Blizzard Glitch for after this fight because we're going to be getting rid of it shortly in order to do a stealth section. So we're going to pick up Hoarfrost Fog and the Chaos equivalent Chaos Wave. These are abilities that use the Mist power-up. Unfortunately, you get this relatively late in the game, but this is what it does. Yeah, that looks great on encoding, I'm sure. Anyway, yeah, that's Mist Dashing. It's the fastest form of movement in the game. However, due to the visual effects, you can tell it can be difficult to control and difficult to see where you're going. So you really only want to use it in select areas where you kind of know where you're headed to. You won't have anything opposing you. It's not really costly on magic to just do that. If you hit enemies, it can cost you a fair amount of magic, but on its own, it's actually not that bad. The more limiting factor is that your Mist power goes down as you do that. In addition to that, you do not want to enter a loading zone as you're doing it, because you can enter glitched states where your Mist power does not refill, which means that you must restart from checkpoint to remove it. Slight sequence break here involving these guys. We are going to use Guillotine into the Mist power. Guillotine is that spinning attack with the whip that I used early on quite extensively. So Guillotine has an interesting property where it moves you upward somewhat at the beginning of it. If you cancel that out with a Mist, you can gain a slight amount of height and then carry that over the wall. Another possible outcome is that the guys shoot you as you jump there, and that damage boosts you over, which is technically faster, but not consistent. We're going to be entering an elevator room here with a similar skip as well. This one can be kind of annoying to get, but it does save time in most situations, even if you do fail it, like... I think you can fail it like 15 times before it starts losing time. Using fire cover here to clear enemies. There is a version of it where you can go to the top of this staircase and make a similar jump here, but then you're just moving a difficult jump from the early part to the later part. For this one, I'm doing the hard jump immediately here. So I'm using a single attack to force myself onto the ledge here. That's a consistent setup that I found up for this. And then once again, trying to use Guillotine into Mist to get on top onto that platform. And you kind of like snap onto the edge of it. What I've noticed over time is that it seems like the furniture up there causes you to target it rather than just gain the extra height, like that. Slight jump into an area attack gets us on top of the next section. But yeah, I've been trying to brainstorm ways that I can maybe break the furniture without having to do jump attacks there. But haven't really stumbled upon anything promising yet for that. This is the stealth section I was referring to. We will be restarting from checkpoint to remove our blizzard glitch. And going in here. So we're trying to possess a scientist and get our way into the clean room. Unfortunately, getting this first scientist is, as far as we can tell, impossible. I mentioned we a lot. The other person who's mainly pushed this game for RTA has been Church and Sarge. There has been a segmented run by Vipiazone. There's been minor work done by Findlestick, Akion, and Afox here and there. I believe it's Afox is his name. But the only RTA runners that have been doing this have been me and Church. There's a new runner that's been doing new game somewhat called Castlevania, who's been working a little bit on new game here and there and kind of got me looking at that route. So we're waiting on the second scientist to show up here. Important that we stay out of the line of sight, because if you get caught by this scientist, it's a huge time loss. Like a minute 30 or something. I know this because a scientist has gotten supervision before and spotted me. So ever since that happened, I just hide in this corner and hope for the best. But we're very quickly coming up on the first Acolyte fight, the second version of it. As I mentioned, this is the Blizzard glitch that we really, really, really want. We can cope if we don't get it, but it's the most time-saving one in the run. And we can potentially take this almost to the end of the game. So as with the other boss fights, we're going to be using Whirlwind on this rather large-bodied enemy in order to do extra damage. And just trying to set her up at low health in order to initiate the final part of this. I believe we get a little bit of poor luck on this fight. She has a lot of attacks, which can make it difficult to stay on top of her. So this is a change of phase. Once she hits her second life bar, she starts to do this attack. She will also do this attack if it takes too long to reach another phase. As I mentioned, if she does some really poor attack patterns, or we get really poor luck setting up Infinite Blizzard, it is possible to get a second one of those. So we get her to low life, and now we're just going to try to freeze her with freeze balls. The reason for this is it'll slow her movement and make it easier to get a Blizzard off. This is an improvement that I made to the route. It's not foolproof, but it's the best solution that I had. Otherwise, you're spending so much time chasing her all over the place that it can be very difficult to get a beat on her. Okay, so again, taking it really slow, making sure that I get the Infinite Blizzard on her. But yeah, if she moves away too much, or if she does too many of her rather problematic patterns, she can get another air phase, which is somewhat frustrating. But using that freezing technique that I just showed, that has helped out considerably in preventing her from kind of going wild. A little bit of controller input there, sending me up. It's possible to skip this next arena by doing a very, very precise jump on the left to an upper platform. That would save having to go through this arena. I would be skipping it at ideally on the first attempt, about the time that I'm starting this fight here. But that being said, it can be problematic to get up there. And since we have plenty of magic, I have a situation for this. That large guy has armor that we need to burn off. If we don't burn it off, then we can't damage him even with Blizzard up. So that's why I use the Chaos Bombs. If I got too close to him, I wouldn't be able to break the armor, so Chaos Bombs helps with that situation. I would say some of the biggest improvements that I've done to this route, Church and Sarge valued Whirlwind much higher than I did at first. And then I kind of caught on to why he liked it so much when I started to understand that kind of sweet spot in attacking. But I think some of the best improvements that I brought to the run has been kind of figuring out efficient ways to use Chaos Bombs and freezing attacks to set up favorable situations. I don't recall seeing that in any other runs. Particularly for a later fight, Abaddon, Chaos Bombs are going to be super good on that. Right now, Trevor wants us to pick up pieces of the Mirror of Fate, which is currently broken. A device that has much more prominence in the game, Mirror of Fate, but not so much here. In here, it's a glorified key. We're making our way over to Agrius. In the first game, you fight an entity known as Pan. Agrius is Pan's brother. Pan gives up his life so that you can save the world by opening up the gate to the realm of the Necromancers. He also assists you on your journey. But Agrius doesn't know this, and he blames us for his brother's death. So he's going to try to attack us. This is another stealth section. You use daggers here to hit bells to draw Agrius's attention. The leaves on the ground are sound devices. You're normally meant to kind of climb around and use mist to avoid stepping on leaves. But with the stealth dashing tech that was discovered, you can outrun Agrius pretty easily. I get pretty lucky on this one. Agrius gets caught on a little bit of geometry, so I can make a quick dash to the door. If he was closer to me at this point, I would hide around the corner to the left and bait him around it, and then kind of play Ring Around the Rosie and get into that gate later on. It's a difference of maybe about like 6-7 seconds. So here, because I don't have mana, I'm trying to absorb a little bit of Chaos Magic. I need a tick of Chaos Magic so I can throw a Chaos Bomb at this objective coming up here. After that, I'm going to be using an Ensnared Demon to deal with Agrius himself. Little bit of a pause there. It can be difficult to remember which cutscenes you can skip and which you can't. There's like 100, 120 of them, 100,000 of them, whatever, in this game. So I break the Ensnared Orb here so I don't need to spend time on it in the fight. And yeah, just setting up for Whirlwind. So while Whirlwind does a lot of damage, it initiates this phase change. Because of that phase change, I've been considering looking into maybe going back to an Explosive Earthquake strat on Agrius, but I'd need to do more extensive testing on it. Right now, I'd think that they'd be pretty close to even. Once again, just accidentally forgetting that I can't skip this one. Check out this sick Storm Hammer. Just give him the biggest dunk. Yeah, but you can skip once it hits that close-up. Now we're going to be making our way to the Toymaker. While Agrius isn't that much of an issue without Blizzard Glitch, the Toymaker kind of is. He can be a frustrating fight once you get into his fight proper if you do not have Blizzard Glitch up. An upside to that is the Toymaker boss fight has a grab attack. If you have Infinite Blizzard going as he grabs you, there is the potential to soft lock there. So that's a thing. I actually think we might even see that in this run. Not the soft lock, but the potential for it. This is a slight mini game where you're supposed to break balloons. You can skip it by just moving to the side. Infinite Blizzard allows us to skip over this arena by freezing these guys in place. If we didn't have it, we would have to fight them normally. It is possible that the staff wielder in the back could throw holy water and break us out of this, but it's very uncommon. I think I've had it happen to me like once, maybe twice in all my time playing. Once again, freezing these guys. If that guy's far away like he is, we use bats to deal with him. Moving over to that guy just to make sure that he stays frozen long enough. So the theater is kind of a puzzle platforming section. We're going to be using rat form to kind of open up the stage for production, shall we say. So once we go down inside of here, we're going to need to turn on kind of the mechanisms of the play. You're going to see me absorb quite a bit of magic here. I don't actually need this much magic to turn on the machines. It only requires one Chaos Bomb. However, when you use a Shadow Portal like I just did, it takes some time before it can be activated again. So I'm actually not losing any time by getting magic here. So we're going to come up to some pistons in here. The pistons have a cycle of 1, 2, and then the middle one is 3 and 5, and then the back one is 1 and 2. So what I try to do is I try to look ahead of where I'm at to see what cycle the pistons are on. And I got a pretty good pattern there. Sometimes it can be difficult to read the pattern depending on when you see the pistons, like what part of it they're in. Like, if I see the middle piston, and when I turn the corner, it only shoots twice and then stops, I have no idea if it was on a 3 or a 5 phase. So, I just gotta kind of wait out the cycle. But that went pretty well. I think I've only had one attempt that I've been able to just kind of move all the way through. So now we're activating the play. Play talks about the tragic backstory of the Toymaker, who was deceived by Walter Bernhard, the previous owner of this castle, and is now possessed by demons that were put in him by Walter. What happens is there's a narrator on the right that talks about the story, and you're meant to set down figures that represent the characters and the setting in the background. I already have it memorized, so just move through this nice and quick. In New Game, this is an interesting thing in that it gives you a huge experience reward. It's not super important with how I routed that particular run, but it can be nice for getting the last couple moves if you want. Toymaker himself is going to be I guess you would say a 3-phase fight. The first one is going to be against Sir Walter de Grey, which is a large knight golem. We're just going to kind of dominate him. He's not going to be able to do too much. The second one is going to be Saranganthrix, who's a dragon, mechanical dragon that shoots out kind of like sparker discs and breathes fire. Once again, we'll dominate him pretty quickly, and then we're going to get into the fight with the Toymaker himself. Toymaker shows up on transitional phases of this fight. But yeah, you can see that Explosive Earthquake and Whirlwind will take care of Sir Walter the Grey pretty quick. This is the transitional phase. This is the phase where you can get that grab I was referring to. That being said, since Blizzard is rolling, he only gets like 1, maybe 2 opportunities to get it off. So that's the Sparkler remove. If you get a bad pattern there, he can hit you like he did. But it doesn't really cost you that much time. You do need a little bit of Chaos Magic to burn Saranganthrix, and you do need Chaos Magic in order to deal with the next phase of Toymaker. So there's the grab, and you can watch this. So you can see it's kind of glitching up there. I was able to get out of it that time. But if he does that move, it is possible to soft lock. And now, a weapon to surpass Metal Gear. Got to use the Chaos Bomb to stun Toymaker and get him on the ground. I use Wet Noodle here so that I don't need to use magic. Wet Noodle is extremely fast and kills him in 2 phases. As far as I can tell, it's not possible to kill him in 1 phase of Grounded. I have some ideas on how you might be able to, but nothing concrete. So as you can see, I mean, Kojima was a light producer on this game. Kojima Productions helped with kind of polishing over this game that the Spanish company Mercury Steam came out with. But I mean, you can tell that this is, while Lords of Shadow 1 was definitely the way Metal Gear was meant to be, this is a close second. I mean, it has stealth action, it has biometrics, it has genome soldiers in the form of the Golgotha guards. I mean, it even has a Metal Gear. But we're going to be coming up. The next split is going to be with Abaddon. What happens here is we return, and Zobek tells us that he feels an energy signature of a powerful being. And we are going to find the Hooded Man. That location. So now that we have the mist power, we can traverse to a different place in this area that we visited before. Mist through the gate, and now we can go ahead and use a little mist dashing, since it's a little bit of a straight shot. Very important that you have enough mist to get through this gate and to take this air current up. That's why I'm not using it as aggressively as one might think. The initial turn into mist is also quite costly on the mist meter, so you do need to budget accordingly. Doing a little jump there, because jumping is a little faster on Ascension than just turning into mist. Also gives you a little buffer to get through the gate. You notice when you reach the top of a vent shaft, it kind of like stops. And it's kind of glitchy to get through the vent gate. But you just gotta hope and trust that the game puts you through it. So I was a little sketchy on Chaos Magic here, but I did have enough to break this Riot Mech's faceplate. You need Chaos Magic in order to do this, otherwise you can't even hurt this. After I break it, I use this fire cover to get rid of the Riot Police next to me. But now that I've broken the faceplate, I'm pretty much in the open. I can do whatever I want now. Aside from getting hit by the big spear. Alright, so we're making our way to the Arts District, which is near where the church that Dracula was sleeping at is. We'll actually pass by that church on the right as we make our way down the next street. And it's here that we spot a hooded man who is going to be chased by a huge demon called Abaddon. We're not going to see that because we're just going to skip it, but letting you guys know. We're going to go ahead and pursue that man. And the next area is kind of a tricky place to work out. You need to use a Chaos Bomb to drop a ladder that you can progress with. But the enemies in this area are spread out in a really annoying way. We need to freeze 3 of them and then use a bat to occupy the 4th. But depending on how the large demon moves, it can be kind of problematic. See, like this time the large demon didn't want to move forward. He instead just shot us with his nose juice. So instead I'm taking a little bit of a different approach to do this. That's okay. Since he moved next to the ladder, I could just freeze him. But if I needed to, I had bat ready, so I could freeze somebody up. It is possible to do a climbing skip here. The second scaffolding you can swing in such a way to reach the platform at the far end of the room. After you do that, you can do kind of a glitchy jump to reach a ladder at the end of this sequence. I have a really hard time getting jumped onto that platform in the background, so I don't do this skip. It would potentially save about 40 seconds, I want to say. Like, we would be hitting the top about now. But if you miss it, then you fall into the arena, and once you fall into the arena, you have to clear everybody before you can even do another attempt. So, once again, just kind of hedging on safety here. This jump looks dangerous, but I've actually worked out a good way to do it. Slick movement here. I actually drilled that short segment of movement, and it's considerably faster than doing it the intended way. Like 5-6 seconds just for that one section. We hold this because I know there's going to be 2 guys that fall down here. Those guys have a really high probability of shooting you out of your climb. You can sometimes get away with climbing up, but it's rather uncommon, so I'd rather just take a little bit of a time loss to guarantee that I get this climb. I mean, even if you do that strat, sometimes they get a really good angle and shoot you through the wall as well, so... You know, consistency is king. We're now going to make our way close to where Abaddon is, the huge demon. But before that, we're going to have to clear out some... I think they're like City Hall archives or something. It's a little bit of a rough fight because right now we're a little bit low on magic, as you can tell, so our resources are a bit strained. I could potentially use an ensnared demon to just be freely using my magic. But, I decide against it at this time. Like, even though we have access to ensnared demons, it does take time to use ensnared demon. It would eat up our magic after ensnared demon goes away, and we do need to transmute relics, which takes time if we run out of ensnared demons. So we just need to clear out this arena. Unfortunately, the guy up top there is shooting his gun and not jumping down. I ran into this in the previous run, so I knew a way to adapt to this. And it's not great, but this is the best way I've come up with, which is basically you just use Chaos Bombs to finish him off. In retrospect, I might use an Ensnared Demon here just for this situation for safety, and just use Explosive Earthquake. I believe Explosive Earthquake hits upper floors as well. So this is Abaddon. This is a fight that I'm actually pretty proud of for handling a major issue with it. Abaddon changes his phases and goes in an Enrage phase at about 135% health and 75% health. So what I'm doing here is I'm using Chaos Bombs to make him hit that Enrage. There's a very specific reason for this. If he is frozen with Infinite Blizzard when he tries to do that roar and the charge, it's a soft lock. He's just stuck there in that animation and never gets out of it. So because of that, and it potentially could cause crashes from what I had heard, although I hadn't seen that myself. So what I did is I figured out when he does his transitions, and I noticed that Chaos Bomb's damage is actually quite high. So because it's so high, we can actually back off completely and shoot a couple Chaos Bombs to push him into that phase safely. Which is a huge improvement, I think, to the previous strats that I was running. After these two Enrage phases, we're freely able to do whatever damage we want. This is totally fine as well, because because of the positioning of this weak spot, there's not really a great way to engage upon it and do extra damage. I get a little bit of poor luck here in that he's bent over, so it can be difficult to hit that section with what he gave me. But still a really fast fight, and really proud of how I've improved that. Like, that used to be one of those fights where you literally just walk off and do nothing. And very, very slowly take him down to make sure that you didn't run into that soft lock. But Chaos Bombs made that super good. So I mentioned Talisman of the Dragon, this screen clear. There are two extremely problematic arenas in this game. This is the worst arena in the game. In this one coming up, there are 2 Riot Mechs and 4 Riot Armors. If I was to move all the way down the street, another Riot Mech would spawn. You won't be seeing that one, though. It would take an extreme amount of time in order to clear these guys out, and the probability of doing the climbing sequence after it is quite low as well without it. So I decided in my routing that since I get a free Dragon Talisman from the Chupacabra, this is where I was going to use it. And I still completely stand by this. This is a terrible arena to deal for in a speedrun capacity and a casual capacity. So we're following the purple juice of the Hooded Man. This is a slight skip. You're meant to go on the scaffolding to the side there and jump to this gargoyle. This jump is actually not as scary as it seems. I have failed it once, but it's rather easy to do. I'm jumping in a specific way here so that I have enough mist power to just mist this whole way. Mist is slightly faster than walking here, but I do need enough mist power to make it through that gate. You're going to get to see the wet noodle here. Victor Belmont locks all of our relics away, so all we have is our whip here. Luckily, he doesn't get rid of Infinite Blizzard, and we can just kind of wet noodle him to death here. Next phase of the fight, we're going to get focus, and then wet noodle him a bit. We need about 50 to 75% of our Chaos gauge to throw Chaos Bombs for the next phase. I'm getting a little bit of extra magic as well for the arena after this fight. So now he gets powered up by a relic. It spawns these pillars which power him up. As far as I can tell, Chaos Bombs to break these is the fastest strat. Explosive Earthquake has issues dealing with this. This is extremely consistent and easy to do. Pretty cheap on resources as well. So unfortunately, there is going to be some nudity in this scene and a slight bit of graphic violence. I cannot skip this cutscene, as you just saw. Unfortunately, this is one of the downsides of this run, is that there's just no way to get rid of this scene. That being said, I would say that it's somewhat understated and not the focus of everything, so not the biggest thing in the world, I would say, but definitely something to consider, considering this game. Of note, this demon is the same demon contained in the Dark Crystal of the first game, so it's trying to show you how much of a cool guy that Gabriel is, that he can defeat this immensely powerful demon from the first game. But yeah, Victor Belmont, last of the Belmonts. Gets bodied by Gabbo Belmont. So we got the antidote, or the inoculation, for the demon plague at the lab just before the first acolyte. We give that to Victor to give to some refugees that are hiding underground. Victor then offers to help us draw out the second acolyte. Of note, he has a lot of abilities from the first game as well. Like those wings are wings from the first game that you used to get a double jump ability. He appears to have a form of the Cyclone Boots, which are used for sprinting.
scout is right over here.
So we're going to go ahead and we're going to meet up with the Zobek Lieutenant and Victor. We're going to clear out a place for Victor to issue his challenge to the second Acolyte. So this is why I wanted to get a little extra magic. If I didn't have the extra magic, once again, you could use Ensnared Demon. However, it's nice to start with a little magic for this. Just trying to clear this as quickly as we can, using our abilities. My companions actually did a pretty good job of clearing out the little guys, so that was nice. We're now fighting the Blood of Dracula, which is a manifestation of the evil that is inside Gabriel's soul. We're going to be using Whirlwind to stop the Golem here, and once the inner Dracula comes out, we're going to be using air attacks. This is going to give us access to our double jump. So you can already note, like, we get missed about halfway through the game, and we get double jump near the end of the game. So vastly different than Lords of Shadow 1, where in a New Game Plus, you could just have everything available and can really break the game right open. This game is much more mild for the New Game Plus run.
I will extinguish your humanity.
So we're going to go ahead and clear this Golem. This is kind of a problematic thing, because you need to get a double jump height to deal damage here. Luckily, you can freeze him to stop him from doing anything. But he does have a couple of quick attacks that can knock you out of the air, even if you do engage, quote-unquote, correctly.
I will strip you of your soul.
So I thought I had enough damage to be able to push into the next phase, but he was being problematic at the end there, which is annoying. I'm using Shadow Whip here rather than Chaos Gauntlets, because again, the extra range is worth a little bit more than the extra damage from Chaos. Especially when you're trying to get the initial hits to engage. So now Victor has died, drawing out the second Acolyte. And we have discovered that he is part of a weapons manufacturing group, which is in the building just behind us. So we're going to be dropping our Infinite Blizzard glitch here, because we're going to be reaching another stealth section. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure how they intended you to do this stealth section, but the strategy that I had been made aware of, I don't remember who mentioned it, but it was somebody in my chat said that this is what they used, and it actually seems like it's really good.
I can reach the backup.
So we're going to go ahead and distract the guard on the side here. Otherwise, you'd be working with, like, getting guards off cycle and stuff, and silly things like that. But if you jump up here and mist before that guard sees you, you actually have just enough mist power to get through this gate. So very important to have a large amount of mist power doing this next bypass. I have double jumped and turned into mist and not made it through this gate before in casual play. So I always am very cautious about what I have access to. So doing a little bit of housekeeping there with relics. Made a slight error there. I should have switched back to Ensnared Demon since I was going to be using that, but not that big of a deal. Actually, it wasn't a mistake. I remember I had an input error with it. Like, I did try to move the cursor to it, but it just didn't take it. So now we're going to get beat down by the second Acolyte, who's quite strong, turns out. But we have a plan. We are going to drag him back to a time where he isn't as powerful. We're going to pull him to Castlevania, where Gabriel is strong, and his powers will wither away. When we go back to Castlevania, the second acolyte, I believe his name is Nurgle, will take the form of the Riders of the Storm, which are 3 statues at the top of the castle. And he's going to use these 3 guys to try to defeat Gabriel. There's 3 phases. One's going to have all 3 riders, the second one's going to have 2 riders, and the last one's going to have 1 rider. The riders that are on each phase are set. Like, I can't kill the fat guy and have it not be in phase 2 and 3. The fat guy will always be the last one alive. But they do share a life bar. I get a little bit of bad luck here. They push me into the corner with their moves, and then kind of lock me in there a little bit. I believe that's an issue one more time in this fight as well. I've since kind of decided not to allow myself to even get close to the wall because of these situations. But it was a good learning experience. I think that's a big part of speedrunning too, is admitting your mistakes or admitting that there's a problem in an area and then brainstorming ways to deal with them. And, you know, if something doesn't go well, just making the adjustments that are needed or think about what went wrong rather than just ignoring it. So, we dodge here. I did learn that you can do this in a single cycle like that. I used to think it needed to be 2 cycles, but as long as you're holding forward and make a good dodge, then you can get through there just fine. So now that we've defeated the second acolyte, we need to track down the third acolyte. We find that he's a leading member of the church. And we are going to go to a place where Satan will contact the third acolyte and inform him more details about his resurrection. Of note, sometimes I'm not menuing particularly badly here, is the funny part. Menus are pretty non-responsive in both games, Lords of Shadow 1 and 2. But in Lords of Shadow 2 specifically, it is really poorly optimized for loading. On this computer, I'm running an i7 with a 1080 GTX graphics card on a solid-state drive, and it still has load times. It's pretty baffling. So I try something a little different here. This is a new strategy using misdashing in this area. I actually like this. I think it worked out pretty well.
There must be some way to go forward.
There is another place where I'm going to try that strategy again that doesn't work out as great, but I do think I would do it again. I would just make adjustments to it. This is the Mirror of Fate. As I mentioned, gets turned into a glorified key in this game. It's just a basic shape-solving puzzle with rotations. It should take no more than 4 rotations of a piece to get it in the right orientation to fit it in there. So 1 or 2 rotations, 0 to 2 rotations is pretty good luck. 3 and 4 is bad luck. And anything after that is just an input error. So we just damage boost through this flame. And this is a slight platforming puzzle using the lieutenant. A fireball will shoot where you're at, since you're standing on platforms. And your job is to just make it so that that fireball doesn't hit the lieutenant as he scales here. I've optimized this pretty well. I used to think you had to do that slower, but you can actually go through pretty quickly. The next arena is problematic. It's going to be a bunch of summoners. They have a lot of attacks that are extremely difficult to dodge unless you miss through them. That would cost time. There's a lot of them. They're very aggressive, and they can combine to create a fire elemental. You will see that in this one. So far, I haven't seen a great strat for stopping this from happening. So far, fire cover has been my best option to deal damage to all of them and get them in one place. I'm thinking some sort of combination of that and Explosive Earthquake might be the key, but it's rather uncommon for them not to make a fire elemental. And you can see kind of how aggressive they are here. So luckily something that I did learn here is that Explosive Earthquake will hit the Fire Elemental, which is nice. That means that I don't have to deal with him dodging things. So now we're going to make our way over to the chapel. We're going to learn the identity of the third acolyte, and then we're going to learn the plan. Because there was actually a plan through all this. I won't spoil too much of it, but I'll go ahead and just wrap it up by saying this was all planned by Gabriel and Alucard. Alucard was the one that put Dracula into a slumber to trick Satan and Zobek into revealing themselves. Alucard has assumed the identity of the lieutenant of Zobek and stayed hidden ever since.
Let's continue on.
And that's basically all that this flashback is going to talk about. So this is going to be a flashback to all of those events. There's going to be a couple of fights in here. The first fight, you just use fire cover to try and kill everybody instantly. The enemies in this have extremely reduced health from their presence in the tutorial. I actually get some kind of comical luck here. I do fire cover in the first fight, which should just instantly kill all of the enemies around me. But everybody moves backwards and then gets pushed back slightly by fire cover. So I actually miss a couple of the enemies and have to do it again. But such is life. I don't refill my magic here at all because I know at the end of this sequence I am going to get a full mana bar to assist me with fighting Zobek. At the end of the sequence, we will be fighting Zobek. We fight Ronald here. Ronald's kind of a weird dude in this fight, because he gets knocked back on the ground and stunned pretty easily, like you notice there. Like, I can't just get multiple hits on him. This is where counterattack could help, which is why I did pick it up. However, there's not really a great way to deal with him here. Luckily, you only need to hit him a few times to finish this fight. And this is just a bunch of cutscenes talking about the plan. And then now we're going to go getting into the Zobek, or the death fight. So, phase 1, using Whirlwind, because Whirlwind's good. I actually got a pretty bad pattern on his attacks here. Had I not been as stubborn, I probably should have just conceded one attack to him, like let him do one attack, and just got back on a better rhythm. But I was stubborn and tried to force the issue, hoping that he would do certain attacks. We use Chaos Bombs here to beat the Chamberlains, who are at the top summoning these zombies. After that, we're going to swap over to Void Sword and finish this next phase off with Whirlwind again. It's going to summon a Lightning Trap here almost immediately. Lightning Trap is the worst move that Zobek can do. Because once he summons it, you have to avoid it. And it stays active for a fair amount of time. As you can see there, I got caught by an attack and pushed into it. Even though it doesn't do damage and it's not that costly, it is a time loss. The one upside to it is it puts you in a perfect range to get a sweet spot hit with the Whirlwind. But you really don't want to get hit by it if you can avoid it. The worst thing he can do is summon 2 of those at the same time. So, like, 1 is bad, but 2, I don't think you can even put out any offensive pressure. So once again, clearing the Chamberlains. After I clear the Chamberlains, I'm going to break a Ensnared Demon here, just to have enough magic to complete the fight. Transmuting into Ensnared Demon, so I don't need to later. So once again, starting it with a lightning, which is not great. But you learn to cope, as I mentioned. So you're seeing some of these I'm hitting for 6, but there's been times where I'm like hitting 10 times and stuff, so huge difference between a good hit and a bad hit with Whirlwind. So now I need to miss through his defensive shield here. Funny enough, this is the place where the game tends to crash the most. Luckily, if the game does crash, it immediately goes to the cutscene after this, so it's not that big of a deal. It's also not super common, but it's common enough to where I'm always kind of expecting it to happen in a good run. So, we have a couple more parts of RNG in here. There is another place that I have seen the game crash, but only once. The more important thing is there's an arena just after the death fight that has a riot mech and 2 huge demons. We try to skip that arena in order to not have to fight them. And then there is the final fight with Satan, which can be... you can lose time or gain time depending on what pattern he gives you. So I have a pretty good strat, I'd like to think, for skipping this arena. That did not work. I mentioned at the beginning that not getting the Blizzard glitch off on Risa was a definite time loss in this. This would be the other one. This one hurt a little bit more, I think, but I also just... I have seen this game enough and known this situation well enough to know that I had lost the skip at a certain point and just conceded it. So, by going off to the right here, I'm trying to like, one of these demons is coming for me, the other one goes for the mech. The goal is to get that demon in between, like, make him run into the mech so that they aggro each other. The mech got pushed back into the wall, which is already a bad sign for getting them to engage him correctly. However, I tried with the skip anyway and moved on, and I almost get it there, but unfortunately I got shot at the very last second. So I try the backup, which is once again getting behind him, trying to force him into a fight. The demon slowly engages, which is probably the biggest issue here, and then does a slow attack. I immediately try to get climbing again, but I realize that he's on top of me once more. I'm going to try one more time in order to get him caught up on the mech. But I see the mech is at low health. Once that mech dies, I'm going to have to deal with both of these guys. So I decide that I've lost the skip at this point. It's time to fight. So I immediately break my ensnared demon, and I just start fighting. And I don't have a strategy for this, really, because this isn't the type of thing that you want to run into ever. So I decided that Whirlwind was probably my best option. If the other guy was dead, if the riot mech had actually died, I probably would have also done Explosive Earthquake. So that's my tale about a really disappointing thing at the end of this run. As you will see, it cost me about 1 minute and 10 seconds, which is pretty unfortunate. But as I mentioned, you're rolling the dice so much with this game, with Blizzard and getting a bad Blizzard and sometimes crashes becoming an issue, that it's like something will happen eventually in the run. It's how you react to it that's important. And as I mentioned, I had realized that it wasn't going to work and tried to deal with it accordingly. I will say that after about 20 runs or so of completed runs that got to that point, that has only happened, I think, 2 times, maybe 3. Normally, I will either get it first try or second try. A second try is about a 30-second time loss. Now we're just making our way back to the church where Gabriel was interned. That is the place where Satan has asked to be resurrected. And we're going to hunt him down, along with Alucard. At that point, Satan is going to revive Leviathan to try and destroy all life on Earth.
I've found him, Father. The acolyte is in the cathedral where Zobek first found you. Hurry!
So here we're going to see that same alley where we got decimated at the beginning of the game, coming a little bit full circle. Funny enough, this double jump coming up right here is kind of finicky sometimes. It's not uncommon to fall there if you aren't very, very deliberate with your movement. And the last Mirror of Fate puzzle here. In general, I had average or good luck on these. Nothing outstanding, but also nothing terrible. Should be noted that rotating costs time, which is why I mentioned that having to rotate more is a bad luck. Like, the game kind of stutters a little bit as you rotate. So this is unfortunately the other cutscene that is problematic. I mentioned the nudity with the Dark Crystal Demon. This is a rather graphic violence scene. I cannot skip this. I don't have the ability to. So, I mean, yeah. Talking about the scene coming up, we're going to be scaling over Leviathan. There's going to be jets of green energy that shoot out of him that can hit us. Those cost a small bit of time, but it's much slower to wait for them than to just take the damage and move on. I've done a little bit on optimizing the climbing in that section, but honestly it's a fairly linear path, so there's not a lot you can do with it. Satan's been hitting the juice since Lords of Shadow 1 as well. Much smaller guy in Lords of Shadow 1. Also didn't have a metal cod piece like he does in this game. Sorry, I'm trying to make this as light as I can.
I despise incompetence.
So now I can skip on that camera change. So scaling Leviathan here.
We must go up.
And our goal is to break those chains. And as I mentioned, just kind of jumping from place to place there. Those two jumps skip going all the way around. Also, there's a bunch of pegs going off to the left, but you can actually go here, and that triggers the next scene. After this, we just cut a beeline for the chain to break it. It is possible that energy gets in our way, so we will try to avoid it here, because that is more of a time loss than taking it on the pegs. That being said, there are certain green surges that you just can't avoid due to timing or positioning. So, once we get on top of Leviathan, the elemental summoners will be up there again. We're going to break an ensnared demon and try to use fire cover to deal with this situation. Normally, I would use Explosive Earthquake with how spread out they are, but unfortunately, Explosive Earthquake has weird properties on moving platforms like this. It will not actually hit these guys. The one upside is I have yet to see these guys make a fire elemental, which I think is probably due to maybe the game bugging out and testing with the moving platform. So I don't think they can. Once you clear these guys, you need to pull off the chain. It's possible that there's a light bug where Alucard thinks there's enemies up when there aren't. And now we are fighting Alucard, who is possessed by Satan. And once again, we're using Whirlwind to deal with this fight. We're trying to use very precise dashes to position ourselves in a way that we're getting the sweet spot Whirlwind. And breaking ensnared demons to guarantee that we have enough magic for this. This command grab is okay to get. It does damage and puts him in the perfect position for a good whirlwind. It is still a little bit of a time loss if you get it, though. So you do want to try to avoid it if you can, but it's not the worst thing in the world if you don't. You always shoot 7 black energy globules here. After this phase, on the 7th one, yep, I break a ensnared demon. That's just so that I can keep it rolling and don't have to break it during actual combat. I'll be doing it again on this phase as well. And as he slams the ground, just trying to get in a good position to tip there. So I got 6 hits there, which is decent. And this will be the last phase of the fight. So, as you can see, pretty decently visually impressive game. Not quite as broken or crazy as Lords of Shadow 1. But it does have some visual appeal for casual people because you're going to have a lot more combat. A lot more kind of variance in gameplay, I guess you would say. Even though it's not as interesting from a speedrunning perspective as Lords of Shadow 1, I feel. That's time on it as well. So, kind of if you want a cleaner run with a little bit more casual visual appeal, Lords of Shadow 2 is maybe a better pick. But Lords of Shadow 1 is filled with that glitchy goodness and sequence breaking and out-of-bounds shenanigans that we've come to love in the community. Anyway, this has been Turbodog702 giving a commentary for Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2, the New Game Plus run. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed, and hopefully I'll see you guys at another marathon. See you later. I'd like to say thank you to Church and Sarge, Depiazone, Akion, Afox, Findlestick, and new runner Castlevania as well for helping with this run and searching for cool things therein. I will see you guys another time. Thank you.
I know you, Gabriel Belmont. Your feelings will betray you. You won't kill your son to destroy me. You don't know me, Satan. Father.
The sun is rising. It's time to go.
What happens now?
Who knows what fate has in store?